All right, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to be starting in 5 minutes. So if you need to use the restroom, get some coffee, buy a book, you can do that now. We're going to be starting in 5 minutes. All right, good afternoon. How are we doing? Come on, you can do better than that. How are we doing, church family? Awesome. Hey, thank you for coming back here after a gathering, or if this is your first time on campus today, we're super excited you're here. By this time, you already know who Shaunti and Jeff are. We're super encouraged for everything that they shared with us this morning and yesterday, and we're just excited for all that the Lord has for us this afternoon as they come out and lead us again. So I'm gonna open up in prayer, and then Shaunti and Jeff will come on out. So let's bow our heads and let's pray. Father, thank you for this afternoon where we get to just continue to talk about this topic of marriage, a topic that we know is super important to you. And we're just excited, Lord, that through this conference, we can continue to just learn more about marriage, the importance of marriage, and how there is hope in this institution that you've provided for us. So we just pray for your blessing as we spend time listening to this message, and we just pray, God, that you're glorified in all that happens. We commit this afternoon to you, and we praise you in all things. In Jesus' name, amen. Come on out, Shaunti and Jeff.
Thank you.
And I think I saw the sun shining out there a little bit. So thanks for coming back. So
Yes.
About 5-6 years ago, Shaunti and I had just finished a talk that we'd given up in Ohio. And it was on some of the stuff that we covered this morning, the secrets of the happiest couples. What were the things that those folks did that we could all learn from? So we were standing out in the lobby by our book table, and a gentleman who was maybe 15, 20 years older than me came by, and he handed me a folded piece of paper. And on the outside of the paper, he had written, "The Secret to a Happy Marriage."
Very
And
intriguing.
he walked away. And so I unfolded it because I'm curious. And in it, he had written this. He said, you know, when my wife and I first got married, we made an agreement together that she would handle all of the minor decisions that face our family, and I would get to decide all the major decisions that face our family. And he said, after 40 years of marriage, I can honestly tell you that we have never had a major decision. So everything we're gonna tell you from this point on really is kind of summed up in that story.
No. No.
So what are we gonna tell them?
going to talk about? So you guys know, most of you all met us this morning or last night. We're social researchers. We've done all these studies. And one of the things that we have found, as we said this morning, is that often these little things really make a big difference in our lives and in our relationships. And so we're going to actually share one area where we actually see a major difference, a major benefit in relationships come from one relatively narrow area of understanding. And so we're going to be spending this time unpacking this one narrow area. And it is essentially, as you guys know, I think it was advertised this way, is that there are some differences between men and women that actually are really meaningful and like cause issues without us realizing it. And so we're going to be unpacking that. Mm-hmm. But we need to tell you right up front before we get started that we are going to be making generalizations. There are always exceptions, okay? So from the beginning, realize that if we say, for example, 75% of men said one way, by definition, 25% didn't, right? Everybody's an individual. The key is to use this as a starting point for a conversation so that when you leave here and you walk out into the parking lot and you get in the car and you shut the doors and you look at each other and you go, is this true? that you actually have a starting point where you can say, well, yeah, but oh no, I was actually in the 20% there. And so it actually creates a really good opportunity for conversation.
Just let me also, on behalf of the guys out here to the women, if you have that conversation, sometimes the guy's gonna feel like a deer caught in the headlights because sometimes it takes us guys a while to process through some of the information.
And we're going to talk about that a little bit. Yeah.
So have grace with one another if, you can do that.
Okay, so we should probably start with.
Yeah, we're gonna throughout the talk, we're gonna use a little interactive program. It's called Slido. So use your phones, and what this does, it's all anonymous. You don't have to sign in or anything, and it'll bring up a browser and a browser window, and you can just type in that number 28804444. And that will allow us to ask you all some questions as we're going along to poll you.
We're going to be getting some
and we'll compare you guys to kind of the national audience on some of these questions.
And we strongly suggest that you all don't just do it one per couple. We're going to be asking some of the men some things and the women some things. And so we want you guys to each individually sign in. And if you can't hit the QR code, if your phone won't pull it up, just go to slido.com and type in that number. And all that does, just so you guys know, all that does is that it tells the system to compare all of your, to have all of your answers come up in this section. So that's all that does.
Can I give a quick agenda?
You go.
So
absolutely.
We're going to be until about 3:30. Shaunti is going to be taking the lead, and we're going to help the women understand what's going on inside of us guys. Then at 3:30, we're going to take a short little, 10-minute break, where you can get up, stretch your legs, maybe use the restroom if you need to. Then come back in here right at around 3:40, and we'll then work till 4:30 and finish on understanding women for us guys. We can actually do that. So.
All right. Well, before we get started, actually, here's your first question. And this is actually, if you could this is the only one that I'm going to say, answer one per couple or one per household if you're married, so that we don't double count all the married people. I'm just curious, you know who we are. Who are you guys? So let's see what we have here. We have most of the people, this is statistically the national average. Most people are married first time. This is obviously a marriage event, so there's going to be fewer singles here, but it's awesome if you guys are here learning. So it looks like we've got a good sort of mix between married first time, not first time, 12% single engaged. Who here is engaged? Woohoo! Awesome. So
marriage can be hard. No.
For those of you who weren't here at the services, ask somebody why they're laughing. Okay. So thank you for telling us who you are. So let's jump in to, before we start the understanding men, understanding women stuff, let's do a big picture of the reason why so much of this matters. It turns out one of the things that we have found over the years is that so often the issues that we face in our relationships, like all of you couples that are just starting out, just engaged, trying to, figure out the way forward, one of the things that we can assure you statistically with pretty high certainty is that most of the things that you'll be dealing with are not the big issues. You might have some. It might be that somebody had some abuse in their childhood and it's affecting them today. Or it might be that somebody's married to somebody with a sexual addiction. Or maybe, there's things that have come from your family of origin that are impacting you. There are some big issues out there. But what we found is that even when they're present, most of our issues and heartaches day to day, they're not from those things. Most of the time, what you have is you have a husband and a wife who really care about each other. And you are both trying really hard, but maybe because you don't realize some of these things, like some of the things we're going to be sharing, some of the things that are going on inside, you're trying hard in the wrong areas. And you're kind of missing each other, and you're not making each other feel cared for in the way that you think you should feel cared for after all my hard work, right? And so, and then the other thing that actually happens is even like more heartbreaking. sometimes you've got this goodwill couple who cares about each other and they're trying hard, but they're actually hurting each other. And they would never intend to, right? And so what we're gonna be sharing is the little things that are running under the surface that will just be a starting point to help you try hard in the right areas. And it just makes so much more difference when you don't feel this sense of nothing I do works, right? To go, oh, it's because I just didn't realize what was going on. So one of the main things that we have found, if you're gonna try hard in the right areas, one of the most important things statistically that a couple needs to know is that it tends to be that you and your spouse, this is not 100%, by the way, this is just a tendency, it tends to be that you and your spouse are gonna have two different sets of primary insecurities running under the surface. And by the way, I strongly suggest that you take notes, you put notes in your phone. If there's something that you hear that you're like, ooh, I need to capture that, please don't let that go, because that could be something that God is like tapping you on the shoulder. Remember that, okay? So two different sets often of primary insecurities. Here's what that means. It means by definition that something different is gonna hurt your spouse's feelings than would hurt yours. And you don't even realize it. And so that insecurity is kind of like a raw nerve, and it's running under the surface and you don't see it, but you're hitting it. Oh, I'll stop poking you. I'm sorry, I'm pushing him off the seat. But you're like poking at this raw nerve in your spouse that you don't even know is there because it's not your nerve. And that is one of the biggest unseen issues. Here's the other thing that comes from that. If you've got a raw nerve in a particular area, if there's something that you're insecure about, that something that you've got a self-doubt, something that hurts your feelings, in that area, here's the amazing thing, that also provides an opportunity. Because that opportunity is that you can speak to that place, that tender place in your spouse, and you can build them up in that area. And it has this oversized emotional impact in a way that it's big for them, and it might just, might be nice for you, but it's big for them. Let me tell you how we sort of stumbled across some of this stuff and how big of a deal this was. And the reason why we're talking about this as understanding men and women is that what we found is that those insecurities those things that are running under the surface and those needs that come from them, they tend to be actually statistically quite different between men and women. And it's not 100%, it's usually somewhere in the like 75 to 85% range, but it's meaningful enough that, keep an eye out for it.
As we get into this, I just thought of something. This first half of the presentation, it's going to be Shaunti helping women understand what's going on inside of men. She'll be doing most of the talking. I'm going to be chipping in, but don't think that she's just not letting me talk. Just so you know. And then in the second half, we'll flip the script.
It, and it's going to be him. Yeah, exactly. That's true. He actually had a guy who came up to, was it to you?
It was in
me?
a Q&A, and it was Q&A after the session. And the guy said, do you ever let him talk?
Like, okay, I guess we need to explain this. It's designed this way. Anyway, so let's tell them actually that incident that happened. This is a perfect example. We were doing a series of focus groups, and we always, I should explain, we always do interviews, focus groups, stopping random people on street corners. Like, we do a lot of just personal conversations with random people. And then we do the
And we do that in order to try to understand what is it that average folks are confused about or don't get.
Yeah. And then once we sort of think, oh wow, I've heard this 137 times, I think that's a thing, okay? Then we start testing it on the big nationally representative surveys in order to figure out, okay, what percentage does that apply to? But we were in that process of the focus grouping around this, and we had 2 nights set up a focus group. First night was a group of college-age young men. The second night was a group of college-age young women. And we were in one of those conference rooms that those conference rooms, you've probably seen these, where you have like the table, and then there's those whiteboards on the walls that have those doors that close. You know what I'm talking about? So picture that with these 2 whiteboards on the 2 walls. The first night with the guys, I opened up this whiteboard, and these were like 20, 21-year-old guys. And I said, I want to do something different tonight. I kind of want to chart what it feels like to be a dude. I don't know, tell me, what does it feel like to be a guy? And so I divided the board in half, and on the left side of the board, I basically said, okay, what are the things that if someone says this or does that it feels kind of bad? That it kind of bums you out, it hurts your feelings. Not that any 20-year-old guy is gonna say, it hurts my feelings, but you know what I mean? What is that stuff? And then on the right-hand side, what is it that lights you up? What is it that feels great? And it's we were basically charting the fears and insecurities, and then we were charting the needs and the good things, what are those things? So we spent all evening on it, and they told me what to write and erase, and we all got it. We got it just perfect. And then I looked at my watch and I realized, oh my gosh, we are way over time. The girls are gonna be in here tomorrow night, and I don't have a chance to erase this whole thing, so let's just close those doors. So the next night, I was in there with the college-age young women, and I opened up this whiteboard on this wall, and I had that same thing, let's chart your fears and your needs as women. And this one young woman raises her hand, and she interrupts me. And she says, excuse me, but I really object to this language. I'm like, it kills him. She said, I object to this language. I'm like, okay. And she said, it's not our fears and our needs as women. I mean, we're all just people, right? And we have the same fears and we have the same needs as people. And I said, okay, that is totally fine. Let's chart your fears and your needs as people. And so we spent all night on it, and they told me what to write and erase, and we got it all just perfect. And then at the end of the night, I purposely left 5 minutes. You knew what I was gonna do, right? Yeah. I left 5 minutes at the end, and I asked these young women, 21-year-old young women, the guys were in here last night. Does anybody wanna see? But they said, of course. These college-age girls are like, yes, So I opened up this whiteboard, and then I just stood back and I watched their faces. Because they started processing what they were seeing, and their heads were swiveling back and forth. Their eyes were getting really big because there was not one word the same. Not one. Except for, and, the, right? Not one. So what was on the board? And so here's what we found in all, and this is not just then, but this is what we've seen in all of the studies that dealt in any way with men and women as men and women. So I think 10 of the 12. And so it's been confirmed in study after study after study.
Age range?
Yes, and so we've now studied this from age 15 to 75 for both women and men. And here's, when you're like, what was on the board? Here's what was on the board, and here's what we've seen in the numbers. And this is, again, about 75 to 85% of women and men, depending on which survey we were talking about. So for girls and later as women, the question, the insecurity, the worry, the question in the heart, you can basically summarize it as, am I lovable? Am I special? Am I beautiful? And you can kind of like encapsulate it as, am I worthy of being loved for who I am on the inside? Okay? And so we love to feel loved, right? And cherished and adored. And, that's what lights us up. And it's this big surprise for us as women to find out, like, for boys and later as men, feeling loved is nice, but it didn't make it on the board. And it's because the question under the surface is totally different. For most boys and later as men, again, age 15 to 75, the question isn't, am I lovable? It's, am I able? Am I adequate? Do I measure up? Do I have what it takes? You could kind of summarize it as, am I any good at what I do on the outside? Think about how different those two things are. Am I worthy of being loved for who I am on the inside? Am I any good at what I do on the outside? And it lends that totally different set of insecurities and worries and questions, lends itself to a totally different set of primary needs that somebody is longing for, right? Now, I need to say at the very beginning, to some degree, we are all insecure about everything and we all need everything, right? Like, that's in there. However, what we're downloading to you today and bringing to you from the research is the stuff that we have found that most of the time lends us to trying hard in the wrong areas or hurting each other without intending to, because it is that heartbeat stuff that is probably different. Now, some people, you're gonna hear yourself and you're gonna be like, wow, I think I'm in the 25%. Great. Your application of this is gonna be unique. As you guys work through things, the key is, again, use this as a conversation starting point so you can say, what is our pattern? And how do we honor each other in this? So, I should probably start with the men.
Yeah.
Helping women understand men. You okay if I just
absolutely
dive into
in.
that? Okay. So let's now take the next, 40 minutes or so, and let's just look at, ladies, let's look at these dudes that we're sitting with, okay? And here's a couple of things that are, we're only gonna get to a few things, but here's a few things that really will matter. Like I said, we women, we love to feel loved, right? We love to feel cherished, that he cherishes us, that he loves us. We kind of think that feeling loved is sort of the whole point of having the relationship. Sort of like, if you're not gonna feel loved, what's the point, right? And it is a huge surprise to find out, like I said, that for men, that's not the point at all. And that 3 out of 4 men, 74% of the men on my survey said, if I have to make a choice, and by the way, nobody would wanna have to make this choice, okay? We are forcing them into this choice. But these men said, if I have to make a choice, I would choose to give up feeling that my wife loves me. Give it up. If I could just feel that she appreciates me, that she respects me, that she believes in me, that she trusts me, that she admires me. And those things were far more important to the average man even than feeling that his wife loves him. Now, that is a big deal difference between men and women. And it gets us as women into so much trouble because we women are really good at showing love, right? And we just are. And let me actually ask a question to the women out here, because I'm actually really curious. I should have put this as a poll. How many of you women feel like it comes naturally to say, I love you, like to your husband, to your kids? Like, just raise your hand if you feel like it sort of comes out naturally. It won't be 100%. Yeah, like maybe 80% of the women in here, something like that. And we say, honey, I love you kind of naturally. We do things that we hope he'll find to be loving. And the same stinking time, without realizing it, we might be criticizing him a lot. Or we might be like questioning his decisions all the time. Or, I don't know, occasionally telling him what to do every now and then.
This is what you've heard that other women
Yes,
do.
other women, clearly.
Right.
Oh my gosh, you should see the faces of the men in the room right now, because so many of the men are going, I can't nod. I'll get in trouble if I nod, you know? But it's true, and we will do this, like, these little things. Like, I would with Jeff, when our kids were little and, you know, he would have them for the day, I would leave him with a list of what he should do every 5 minutes with the kids. And then I'd probably call back in, you know, and have you done that? Have you done that? And I don't realize that when I do that, what I'm saying is, no, you're not able. No, you're not adequate. When you come along behind your husband and put the dishes, after he's done the dishes, and you put the dishes in the dishwasher the right way. Okay, so I hit a nerve over here. I literally, last weekend we were in Cincinnati. I think I told you guys that this morning. And somebody literally wrote in, we had a longer time together, and so we had a question and answer session. And someone said, what do you do when just 30 minutes ago he put the dishes in the dishwasher and I came along and did it the right way? Like, but we do these things and we don't realize that we're saying, no, you're not able. And oh, by the way, this thing that you did on the outside, it wasn't good enough, you failed.
Yes, indeed.
Nerve number 2 over there. Okay, so what do we do, right? What do we do about this? So for this bit, we have to understand 2 things. There's lots of things that we can understand. I mean, this is why, you know, we ended up doing a whole study and writing a whole book, right? You know, it's like there's a lot of stuff I wish I could share, but just in this area, just 2 things will get you started. And the first is, okay, so what is it that's hitting that nerve? Like, what is it that does that? And so we can, like, hopefully avoid it, you know, and kind of recognize what's happening. Now, obviously, you don't have to do anything with what I'm telling you. At all, but this is just for you to be aware of. And I guess if you're not doing anything with what we're saying, then it's like that Dr. Phil comment, how's that working for you? Right? But anyway, so the first is to understand what hits that nerve, that insecurity on the inside. And then the second is, what is it that builds them up? Like, it's not just how do you avoid the negative, how do you show the positive? Like, what do you do that makes a difference? So let's start with just the, you know, what is it that hits that nerve so you can hopefully avoid it? And here's the real answer for the women in the room to know. It is gonna sound so minor to you. It is any little, like, day-to-day thing that says to him, I think what you just did is inadequate. That's it. I think this thing you just did is inadequate because it kind of tells him, even though you don't mean this at all, it kind of says to him, I think you are inadequate. And it's these little day-to-day things that we wouldn't think actually matter at all. Let me give you an example of this. So, because I always learn better from examples. And we had just released the new editions of For Women Only and For Men Only. And I was flying back on a plane from speaking at a women's event we were getting ready to film the videos, like the teaching videos that go with this. And I was talking to the guy next to me on the airplane. And I should confess that I interview every man I come across. Like, I kind of feel bad for the guy who's stuck next to me on the airplane for 2 hours. But if he is bored, he's fair game. So anyway, and And it's actually, I hate to say it, it's actually really good data because you have no idea who they are. They can be completely honest. And so that's one of the things that happened with this gentleman on the plane is that we started talking about his relationship and his shoulders, as he started talking about his relationship with his wife, his shoulders just kind of slumped. And he just had that defeated look, you know what I mean? He kind of had that feeling. And he said a phrase that I had heard so many times from Jeff in prior years before we started all this research. And I had no idea what he was talking about. And I can guarantee that a pretty big percentage of the women in the room have heard this phrase and had no idea what your man was talking about. And so here's what he said. He said, look, I love my wife, but nothing I do is ever good enough for her. Okay. And so now I thought I knew what he was talking about because of all the research. And so I said, can you give me an example? And he said, I'll just tell you something that happened last night. He said, we were having dinner with friends. We had friends over for dinner and the kitchen was kind of a wreck and she had to actually run out for a quick meeting. And she said, you know, honey, would you be willing to just clean the kitchen so when I come home, we can go right to bed? And he said, yeah, sure, no problem. And he said, so I cleaned the kitchen. She comes home from her meeting, kisses me on my cheek and looks over my shoulder into the kitchen and goes, huh, and grabs a sponge and starts re-cleaning all the countertops. And he said, it just kills me that nothing I do is ever good enough for her. Okay, now I'm looking at all the women's faces. And some of the women, some of y'all have the look on your face, I hate to say it, the same look that I did the first 20 times or something that I heard a guy say something like this. I hate to say this out loud, but some of us are thinking, dude, grow up. That should not bother you. You are so oversensitive, right? I don't expect you to nod, ladies, but we kind of think this is just a minor thing that should not bother you. And after I heard this over and over and over from the guys, it was like God finally whacked me upside the head. And I realized, wait a minute. The reason that I am saying that should not bother you is that it wouldn't bother me. He's not me. He's wired very differently. And for those of us who are believers, we can say he's wired very differently by a God who knew what he was doing. Okay? All the men said, amen.
Well, can I also...
Yeah, go for it.
Can I say that this application, as Shaunti is describing it, with husbands and wives, but moms with your sons, it's the same thing.
It is. It is. I mean, ladies, how many of you have a son? Okay? Yep, me too. How many of you, ladies, how many of you work with a man? See, men are everywhere. We have to understand this instead of just assuming that we are all the same. Because basically what I just described to you, that example of that guy where his wife grabbed the sponge and started re-cleaning all the countertops and half of the women in the room were like, oh, really, please, right? What I just described to you is a perfect example of something different is gonna hurt your spouse's feelings than would hurt yours. Now, often it is gender related, but not always. There's plenty of other ways that this applies. It's just a matter of going, oh my gosh, and being willing to look at this. Now, when I asked this guy who was on the airplane telling me this story, I said, is there anything that your wife could have done where you would have received that differently, right? Where it would have felt different? And he kind of looked at me like I was nuts, like I had two heads, you know? And he said, oh, absolutely. If she just would have appreciated what I tried to do. If I missed the crumbs under the toaster, she can clean it later when I'm not looking. And I realized, okay, perfect example of, without realizing it, she was signaling, no, what you did on the outside wasn't good enough, you failed. And it's actually a painful message in a way that we as women actually have to acknowledge and honor, as opposed to saying it shouldn't be that way.
Well, isn't, as you often say, you're just trying to be helpful, right?
We're just trying to help. Yes. Okay. One of my girlfriends over here is like saying, yes, we're just trying to help, right? I had a woman come up to me after an event in Florida, actually, a few years back. And she's like, they are going to put on my tombstone, she was just trying to help, right? Like, amen, you and me, fist bump, truly. But that's the thing. Guys, just so you know, that's what we're thinking. I know it doesn't feel like it to you, but that is what we're thinking. So we are going to do a quick Slido poll. So get your phones back out.
And sometimes it bumps you off. So you may have to put the number in again.
Just reconnect, and if you need to, put the number back in again. So we are going to ask the men a question. When you and your partner are at odds, which would help most? Being reassured that she appreciates what I do and trusts and respects my judgment and abilities, or being reassured that we are okay, that she loves me? Now remember, feel free, please put your honest answer in. If you're not part of what I described as the majority, we want to know what the numbers actually are. And so this is an example of this group only, this room only, okay? But we have 90-something people, and we have 88-ish%, now 109, 87% of men saying, when we're at odds, what I most want is to be reassured that she appreciates me, that she respects me, that she trusts me, all those things that we were talking about earlier. Now, look at the number, 14%, okay, so 1 in 7 are like, well, actually, I kind of want to be reassured that we're okay and that she loves me. Okay, good. Have that conversation with your spouse, with your boyfriend, etc., okay? So now, just to see that whether there is a difference in this room, it's not necessarily going to be, but let's ask this same question. We have 183 men who have answered. Let's ask the same question of women, okay? Let's see what the women say. When you and your partner are at odds, which would help you most? Being reassured that we're okay, that he loves me, or being reassured that he appreciates what I do, that he trusts and respects my judgment and abilities, okay? And so we're at 65, 78, and so we were 2/3, 1/3, now we're at 60, 40-ish. Keep going, ladies, we're at 143, 157. Okay, so we're at about, this group is actually a little bit more than the average of saying being reassured that he appreciates what I do rather than being reassured that he loves me. But this is a perfect example. It's the majority, but in this room, it's not a huge majority. So have that conversation, guys, with your spouse, with your wife, your girlfriend, in order to find out what is it that matters most. And by the way, let me just also mention, like we're talking about, remember what we said? To some degree, we're all insecure about everything and we all need everything. We don't want to have to choose between these two things. But this is like what emotionally kind of matters the most if you really had to choose. Okay, so let's talk through, for the women in here, let's talk through the second thing that I said that we had to understand about the guys. Which is, okay, we've had the discussion of what are those little things that like send that message that hit that raw nerve. And so the second thing is, what is it that you can say that actually has an emotional impact on him that is similar to the emotional impact that I love you has on many women? Now, that's, again, it's not going to be everybody, but what?
Can I share something here?
Yeah? Oh, dear. Yes.
So you guys, you gotta feel for Shaunti in that when she is learning these things, she is wanting to figure out, is this true? She wants to test it out on. So I'm the guinea pig always, I'm the first line of defense, so to speak.
Kinda.
So she does these things, and it's always, she's wanting to see what works and improve. And so when she was hearing this stuff from men, for about a 2-week span there, she would come up to me at random times in our day, and she would say, Jeff, I so respect you. Okay, that's good to hear. Thanks. And this went on multiple times over that 2 weeks. And finally, I just had to go, babe, we gotta call a timeout on this. I know what you're doing, and I appreciate it. I really, really do. But those words that you're using, they don't work for me.
No, they're not. They don't fill you up in that way.
It's like, and we all kind of laugh about it. It's like, I don't know what words would work that are the equivalent for me as I love you is to you, but I know that isn't it. So she went on a quest for years to figure this one out.
I'm going to figure this out. I was like so bound and determined. And it took like 6 years, several different studies, but I finally found it. And it is the simplest little phrase that you can say to your husband that if he is in this, majority, it won't be everybody, but if he is in that category, that it will have that kind of emotional impact on him. Now, we've been trying to get the word out there for a few years now, so you might have heard this by now, but it's a small phrase. Can anybody guess what it is? Men, you're not allowed to respond. Any women, can you guess what this little phrase is? Somebody yelled it out. Somebody said good job, but it is thank you. Okay, somebody yelled out the other day, let's have sex.
Which I will say can work also.
Yeah. Anywho, that wasn't the one it probably worked, but it wasn't the one that came out on the survey. No, seriously, it's thank you. And it's thank you for the little, the day-to-day little things, thank you for noticing that the light bulbs were out in the hallway and changing them. That was driving me nuts. Thanks for doing that. Or thanks for putting gas in my car. Or thanks for the kids were just screaming on that and I was trying to do the Zoom meeting and you took them out and played with them in the yard. Thank you. You are such a good dad. These little things, they just hit him. And why is it that hits him so much? Well, ladies, you know how if you're a woman who loves to be reassured of your husband's love, where that's a thing for you, because it's not going to be for everybody, but if that's a thing for you, you know how when he says, I love you, it doesn't just say one thing, right? It actually says multiple things. It doesn't just say, hey, I have affection for you. It says things like, you're mine, right? It says, I'm so glad I married you. It says, I would choose you all over again. That's all wrapped up in that phrase, right? And so it's interesting that when we talk to the guys and say, why does thank you hit you emotionally like that? That they say, it doesn't just say one thing. It says, I noticed what you did on the outside first. That's the first thing that I noticed that to begin with. And it was good. And I appreciate it. It's all these things that really make a difference. Now, there are going to be, like we said this morning, there are going to be situations and there are going to be troubled seasons and troubled relationships where the application of what we're talking about here has to be completely different, right? We're talking about the general relationships where there isn't abuse, for example, where there isn't a huge problem with addiction. Because in those kinds of situations, If you're just like, oh, I'll just try harder to say thank you, or oh, I'll just try harder to whatever, to do these things, it can actually be counterproductive. And the kindest thing you can do in those situations is have boundaries, right? For either men or women, depending on what's going on. But the beauty of understanding the emotional stuff that's going on under the surface in most cases is that it really is so simple of just how easy it is to make a big difference.
Can you tell the story about the woman in Wisconsin?
Oh, sure, yeah. No, I had just gotten the survey results back.
And it was for the book that we talked about, the Secrets of the Happiest Couples.
Yes, it was actually on that survey that we actually kind of realized the thank you thing. And so we hadn't finished the book, like literally, I had just gotten the survey results back, and I was speaking at this big women's event in Wisconsin, and I was so excited by what I just learned about the thank you thing that I couldn't help. I was like, I have to share this with you. There's no way I can prove it to you yet, but we just got the data. And as I'm talking about that, it was a huge room, and this one woman who was kind of front and center, kind of where you are, as I'm saying this, she pops up and she marches out the door. And I'm like, sometimes I know things can be hard to hear. Sometimes people can get a bit offended. And it's like, bummer, She comes up to me in the lobby at the book table afterwards. And her eyes are so red. Turns out she hadn't been offended. She'd been convicted. And she said, I realize I never say thank you. You know how we talked about the fact that I love you, for a lot of us, comes out naturally? For a lot of us, thank you doesn't come out naturally. Now, just in the interest of time, I'm not gonna ask for a show of hands. Really need to put a poll in place for this one. But it often is something we're thinking but not saying. And this woman, she said, that is so me. She's like, that very morning, as she had been leaving for the women's conference, she had passed her husband. He was up on a ladder in the living room installing a light fixture, replacing a light fixture. And she said he'd been up there for 2 hours and he was sweating and it was complicated and it might have been a 5 curse word job, right? One of those, right? And she said, it didn't even occur to me to say thank you. I just waved on my way to the women's conference and said, bye, honey. And she said, I was so convicted when you said that. I ran into the lobby and I texted my husband and I said, when I left this morning, I didn't say thank you. Thank you so much for doing that. You know how much I've been wanting that installed, and I really appreciate that. I can't wait to see you later. And she pressed send. She comes up to me about 5 minutes later, and there's a text string back from her husband, and it says, who are you and what have you done with my wife? And she said, I think I need to work on this. And I said, we all need to work on this. I mean, all of us, even if maybe our husband is in, the 20% or the 25% or whatever the number is, it's still something we need to work on to understand one another.
Can you share the word picture of why this matters so much to us guys?
Sure. Well, actually, I was going to do the Slido poll
sure.
Then do that. Is that
Great.
Okay?
Perfect.
All right. So here's the last one for the men. This is the last one that's okay, give us a chance to see your heart on this. This is a choose all that apply. You can choose any of them that matter. In terms of what makes you feel cared for by your wife, which of these are a little thing that has a relatively big impact on you?
And this is choose all that apply.
This is anything that matters. We're only going to be able to see the top 4, but I just want to see what the numbers are. Okay. Well, that was just one person. Okay. So noticing when I do something and saying thank you, saying you did a great job at that, mentioning something I did well in front of others, and I'm going to read down on the app, making it clear that I make her happy, that she appreciates something that I did for her, like she smiles at me, etc. making it clear that she desires me sexually and or that I please her sexually, okay? And so let's just see what these numbers are. Because again, no one's gonna be at probably 100%, but for the men in the room, we're at almost 100 guys, we're over 100 guys. The top answers are the thank you, making it clear that I make her happy, and the sex thing. I guess that's not a big surprise. But that's an example. Like, this isn't to say that your husband is in this group where, noticing when I do something, that's 66%. That's not 100%, but ask him, like, what categories is he in? What are the little things
that build
him up and that matter to him, okay? All right, so you were asking me to tell the story of why this matters. Why this matters so much. Okay. So we have to remember when we're talking about why does this stuff matter? Remember, always bring it back to remembering that for a percentage of men, which looks like it's about 3 out of 4, not 100, but about 3 out of 4 men, there is that self-doubt and that insecurity that's running under the surface. And it's that I wanna be a good husband, I wanna be a good dad, but am I? Like, I don't know, like, that's the question. And so we were asking, I would often ask men as I was doing like random interviews and stuff, I would also often ask tell me like what it feels like to be a guy kind of question, like tell me what emotionally that feels like on the inside. And we would hear these word pictures occasionally that were actually the same word picture, like different guys in different places in the world actually would use the same word picture sometimes. So here's one. This one guy said, here's what it feels like. Remember how when you would be like in kindergarten or first grade and you'd have craft class and you would like, make the ashtray in craft class, Okay, for anybody who is under 35, we actually made ashtrays in craft class, just so you know. Everybody's like...
To show our parents how much we loved them.
Yes. Today it's like pencil pots or something, or vases or whatever. But yes, back in the day, it was ashtrays. And so he said, how you would make an ashtray in craft class? And it would be like, you were 6 years old. So like the paint would all be runny and it would be misshapen and it's all wonky on one side. And this guy said, but when I'm bringing that home, I'm walking that home to my mom, the most important woman in my life, and I have this thing in my hands, and I am getting ready to present it for her inspection, my heart is beating so wildly because everything in me is just hoping she's gonna say, oh, buddy, great job, as opposed to, it's all wonky on one side. And this guy said, that's the issue, is that often we're kind of just those little boys inside, sort of, and we're still holding up what we've done to the inspection of the most important woman in our life, and just longing to know we've done good. Now, this is not always gonna work out that way, right? Because sometimes there are issues, but recognizing for us as a wife who cares about our husband, like this would be completely different if you didn't care, right? But who cares about what's going on the inside, that's a powerful thing to remember, that affirmation.
Shaunti, after the I so respect you debacle, she learned the thank yous very, very well, and she is fantastic at it. She also does one other thing, to convey her kind of, like good job, Jeff, feeling. And she'll every once in a while say, you're a good man, Charlie Brown. And I'll tell you, I will run through a wall for her. And if you will do that,
guys, for the ladies,
to the ladies, It might not be those same words, but if you will practice this and do this, he will run through a wall for you. He is longing for those words and to show you that he is worthy of those words.
I was speaking at an event in Canada early on, and I shared this. And I had a guy he was 6'8", and he was huge, like 350 pounds, like huge man. And he came up to me in the book line. I was signing, and I looked up at him, and he had tears just flooding down his cheeks. And he's like, that is me. Like, I've never been able to explain that before. And the thing is, for the women in the room, this is, and actually, let me tell the men in the room, guys, this is how we feel about you. It is. We do appreciate the things you do. It's just our brains and our words are often wired towards love, which is fine, right? I know, but don't think that means that we don't have that appreciation for you. And have grace while we're learning this. We're gonna say the same thing to the women, in the men's section. Like, have grace with us on both sides while we're learning this, because it's real. This is how we feel. So, do I have a minute to do the other one?
Okay, it's helpful, and we'll build into it a little in the next.
Okay, so I'm just going to touch on another topic that is actually really, really critical, but it's something that is relatively easy to explain. So often for us as women, when something doesn't seem to be done right, okay, when the kitchen counter wasn't cleaned correctly, or the kids you think weren't handled correctly, and he let the kids out in the snow without their coats, and you have this, I'm talking to Florida. That doesn't make any sense.
Took them to Target in their pajamas.
Okay, like something other than snow.
I have no idea anyone who would ever have done that.
But here's the thing, we as women sometimes, and both of us can do this, right? It's not just us as women, like it happens on both sides, but it's really easy to say, what was he thinking, right? Okay, I'm not gonna ask you to raise your hands, ladies, but let's figure out what's the translation of that. He wasn't thinking, right? Like that's what that translates to. Here's one of the things that blew me away once I started realizing what I was seeing from the surveys. Men think about everything. They just do it differently than we do. Because for us as women, if we are thinking through something, usually you actually know about it. And I'm not being offensive, actually. Literally, that is the way the female brain is wired. The female brain, again, there's exceptions to this, but in general, there are far more connections to the verbal centers, and women's brains, the neuroscientists actually watch on like functional MRIs as they see that a woman is far more likely to be thinking something through while she's talking it through. Like it's by talking it through, it helps process it. Men are exactly the opposite. It is astounding that the human race survived, if you think about it. Men are the opposite. It is actively difficult in most cases, not all, but in most cases, it's actively difficult for a guy to think something through while he's talking it through. And again, it's because of the brain wiring. And we have some stuff in the book actually that will help you sort of unpack that a little bit and see why we're saying that. But here's what most, not all, but most men do instead. They go underground. And instead of talking it through, they're thinking it through internally, almost like a chess match, kind of, where it's like, okay, if I do this, then this thing has to have happened before, but if I do that, then this thing has to happen over here. And they do this underground, sometimes for days, right? And it pops out the other end as a decision. And he says, I think we should do this. And you, not knowing this, you're like, well, I don't know, what about this thing over here? And he's like, I just spent 3 days thinking about this. We didn't know, okay? And for us, just so you know, guys, we view this as the beginning of the conversation. When you say what you want to do. And listen, again, there's nothing wrong with either of those ways. It's just for us to recognize, for us as women, to recognize that in most cases, this isn't all, and I can't remember what the numbers are right now, but it was like 80% or something, I can't remember. But in most cases, if we see something that is completely crazy, like taking your kids to Target in their pajamas, hypothetically, if we see something that looks completely crazy.
They're adventurers.
He's being an adventurer. Okay. Instead of going, what was he thinking? Stop and think to yourself, Shaunti promises me he probably has a reason for this. And instead say, help me understand. What was the thinking about the going to Target in the pajamas? And if you approach it that way, you're asking the same question, right? It's the same question, which of course we have a right to ask the question, but it's asked in a way that is automatically more respectful. See how that works? And automatically assumes you have a reason, I'm not seeing it yet, help me understand.
And I'm not being defensive up here with this, but how many times have the kids gone to Target and never remembered it? But when they went with their pajamas on and walked around, they've not forgotten that their entire life.
Exactly, absolutely.
Not being defensive.
So here you have an example of an application of the different types of parenting that men and women often have, which I wish we could get into because it's fascinating. But we are at the time for our break, and I want to honor that because everybody's like, I need some coffee. So anyway, I guess, Pastor Tiago, do you want to?
Yeah.
All right.
And we'll try to start back in
10, 15 minutes?
10 minutes.
That's
Great.
right. So
All
far,
right.
so good, right? Awesome. Yeah. So as Shaunti and Jeff said, we're going to take a quick 10-minute intermission, and we will start promptly at 3:43. So if you want to go buy a book, get some coffee, use the restroom, you have 10 minutes. We'll start at 3:43. All right, everyone, we're going to be starting up in just a minute, so make your way back into the worship center. We're about to get started. All right, we're going to be starting up for part 2 of our conference, so make your way back into the worship center. And from now, I'm going to hand the floor off to Shaunti and Jeff. Here we go.
Thanks, Diego.
All right. And by the way, I am definitely aware for all of those who are out in the lobby and listening to this, they're still trying to get coffee. So
We get it.
There was a long coffee
So
line.
I'll start with, before we jump into the actual content on the women, I'll share a little bit of a inside baseball of how the For Men Only book came about. So Shaunti wrote the For Women Only book, and it became a bestseller. I mean, sold off the charts. And what does a publisher ask an author to do if they have a bestseller? Write a sequel. And this one was tailor-made. It's just that I didn't want to be the guy writing it. And so the publisher had to really try to convince me, as did Shaunti. And she had one night after I had dragged my feet for a couple of weeks, she said to me, she says, we're going to go out for dinner. We're going to get someone to watch the kids, and we're going to hash this thing out. So we did. And while we're sitting there at dinner, she said, so what is it really? Why don't you want to participate in this research or write this book with me? Because I was a lawyer by training, and I'm not afraid of words, but she said, what was it then? And I said, well, you helped women understand what was going on inside of men. She goes, right. And I said, I'm not sure you guys can be understood. And she went, what? And that was the reason why we picked a public place. So there would be witnesses to any violence that would occur.
I'm like, excuse me?
So here's what I said to her. I said, well, look at it. We guys kind of see you women as random. And that wasn't helping my cause in any event. And I said, so think of it this way. For a guy, it's almost like I'm standing in front of some machine and I pull a lever and the machine does this. Tomorrow, I'm standing in front of that same machine and I pull the lever and it does this. And in our mind, we think random.
And I'm like, we women are not random. Like if you're getting a different result, you're pulling a different lever. Or you're pulling it differently or something, because we are not random. We can be systematized, we can be understood, just like you guys can.
And so that book became a case study to prove to Jeff that women can be understood. And guys, I can tell you, they can. They're not as complicated as we have oftentimes thought.
Or joked.
Or joked. Yeah, well, I mean, we're gonna still joke because that's what we do. But the other problem with the book, in my mind, was, is any guy ever gonna read it? I mean, like, for real. It's a book about their wives or about women. Do guys read relationship books? I mean, before we wrote this, I read one relationship book in my life, and that was only because I had to in the premarital counseling class in order to marry her. There would be these relationship books that would wind up on my side of the bed every now and again. And she'd say, that's a really good book. And I just never read it. So that was a concern. And I was telling that to the publisher, to our editor. And he said, yeah, that really is a concern. But we'll hope that the wives will buy it for the husbands, you know? But even if no guy ever reads it, why am I putting all this energy and time into it? So we started to brainstorm, what could we do to make this more appealing for guys? And I thought of it, and this is back in 2005. And I thought about it, and I said, I love when I get something like a piece of electronics gear or whatever, and I open up the box and it comes with the manual when they used to have a paper manual with it. And does any guy ever read the manual before they start working the thing and pushing buttons and figuring it out? Most don't. Some do, but most don't. And one of the reasons why they also don't read the manual first is because it typically comes with that little glossy fold out, what's it called? The quick start guide. So I said, what if we created a quick start guide for women? So they might not read the book, but in 5 minutes they can be up and running. And if anything goes wrong, then they can go to the manual.
I'm like, so we'll read a whole book and you'll read the quick start guide. He's like, but it gets you started. It does get you started. I actually had one woman, after the book first came out, she said her husband pulled this out of the cover and put it in his wallet. And she said at random times during the day, she would find him looking really confused and going, which I loved. I thought it was okay, that works then.
So here's my attempt to unpack that mystery that many of us have felt over the years. So one of the surprises, that we're going to uncover here, it starts with something that's a non-surprise. So it's not surprising for us guys to know that our wives, or to hear that our wives need to feel that we love them. We just we know that. We've been around enough to know that that's important. What is the surprise, though, is how easy it is for her to feel that we don't, to not feel loved by us. And that's so kind of confusing to us guys, because the way it kind of plays out, remember the whiteboard? Am I lovable? Am I beautiful? Am I worthy for being loved for who I am on the inside? That question that most women have, according to the survey, is always kind of hovering there in the back of the mind. It's not something that she's necessarily conscious of at any given moment, but it's there. And then when something triggers it, causes it to kind of spring to life, it moves to the front of the brain and it becomes a worry, a doubt, a question that feels unsettling and unpleasant.
Yeah.
And this doesn't just work in bad relationships. Even in good relationships, even in good marriages, that question is oftentimes still there. And it kind of morphs from what Shaunti shared on the whiteboard to a new set of questions when you're married. It's, is he happy he married me? Would he choose me all over again?
Does he
really love me? And now, the problem is, us guys, we oftentimes just don't feel like we have a grid for this to understand this, because when Shaunti and I got married, I knew that she loved me. I just did. And the question ceased to come up in my mind. It was just settled as far as I was concerned. But according to you, women don't have that same feeling.
It is not necessarily the same thing, because guys, you see your wife walk down the aisle and you say the I do's and you sign the papers, and then something in you is like, okay, cool, on to the next thing, right? And you need to know there is no switch in a woman's brain that gets flipped to the, oh, now I feel permanently loved position, right? She has that question, am I lovable? Am I worthy of being loved? And in marriage, she has that every day unconsciously. Again, I think it's 82% of women, not 100. But in marriage, it morphs to, does he really love me? And she has that question every day. So the key for the guy to know is she's looking for the answer to that question every day.
So let's look at how this might play out. So let's say that Shaunti and I are over breakfast one particular morning, are having a discussion. Euphemistically, a discussion.
Those emotional discussions.
And as it's going on and kind of emotions are running a little hot, all of a sudden I look at my watch and I realize I've got a client meeting that I got to get off to. So I get in my car, back down the driveway. Guys, as I am driving down out of my neighborhood, toward that client meeting, what's happened to that discussion that Shaunti and I were having just a few minutes ago?
All the guys are like, gone.
Gone, totally gone. And if I'm honest with myself, and if you're honest with yourself, when you roll back in at 5 or 6 o'clock at night, you are hoping she did the exact same thing, that it's gone, right? And?
Ladies?
Not a chance.
Not a chance.
And what's going on?
And here's what's going on, because every guy in the room is like, ugh. So here's what's going on, guys. It's not that she's holding a grudge. It's not that she's refusing to let things go, what you may tell yourself. Instead, what has happened is that question has been triggered. And it's risen up, and it's kind of roiling in her gut. And it's this feeling of, are we okay? And that's the technical term of how this feels. Okay? And that question, in most women, is gonna kind of circle until she's reassured.
So the difficulty for us guys in hearing this is, again, it feels like it doesn't make sense to me. I just don't have a grid for it. I don't have a comparable experience. And actually, I think you do. Let me put it this way. How many of you would say that I never have ever had to worry about my career or our finances as a family or my ability to provide for my family? Those thoughts just don't come up in my mind. I just never feel it. And so I used to always ask that question, for a show of hands. I don't do that anymore, but I can tell you that no guy ever has said that.
I never worry.
I never worry about how I'm gonna have to provide.
We did, we had one. We were doing a big conference for about 1,000 counselors and pastors and ministers and whatever, training them on some of the research. And Jeff asked that question, how many of you feel like you've never had that worry of providing for your family? And this one hand in the front row shoots up and everybody is like, ah, and it was a Catholic priest.
So outside of that small niche, for the rest of us guys, if we're honest, we tend to say, well, yeah, it's kind of always there in the back of my mind. Might not be in the front, but I've always got to be kind of aware of it. As one guy put it, look, the economy could go south, or our company could lose maybe its biggest account. Or if I'm honest, I could be 3 or 4 big mistakes away from getting fired. So it's always kind of circling there in the background. And I was sharing what that guy said to a group of women in a focus group. And one woman said, that is exactly how we feel about you all and our relationships with you. We feel that we could be 3 or 4 arguments away from things spiraling in a negative direction. Not that we're gonna get divorced or anything like that, but from a place where we're moving to a less than optimal state.
Yeah, where we need that reassurance.
So did we want to do a Slido poll?
I would love to do a Slido poll. Actually, you know what I'd kind of like to do? Ladies, I'm gonna do something I don't ever do in a normal survey, but in our group here, I wanna revisit this question from earlier. You have this on your phones and you voted. Does this still make sense to you now that you've heard both sides? When you and your partner are at odds, you've had that argument over breakfast, he's driving away, and what would help most? Being reassured that we're okay, or being reassured that he appreciates what I do? It may be exactly the same as what you already put, but I'm curious if this kind of clarifies it, because normally we do this poll in 2 different places. We did it in the same place, and I just am curious. So it looks like, okay, this group is still that 55, 44, 56, whatever. Okay, so let's do another poll, and now I'm curious, really curious, to see what this group of women is gonna say about this other question, because this was a question that got a really substantial, interesting answer on our nationally representative survey. So let me ask you a question, ladies. If you had to choose, and again, these are 2 bad choices, would you rather endure financial struggles, or would you rather endure struggles that arise out of insecurity or a lack of closeness in your relationship? Would you rather endure 2 bad things, right? But would you rather endure financial struggles, or would you rather endure struggles arising from insecurity or lack of closeness in your relationship? And this is actually pretty similar to what we found in the national study. What we found was when we took out anyone who's single, engaged, blah, 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 and just looked at married women, 7 out of 10, 70% of married women said that, like, I will endure money struggles if I have to, just don't make me endure a difficult relationship with you. Now, look at that, though. Nationally, it was 30%. In this group, it's 11%. That means it's not 100. That means that, guys, for you to be aware of, most of the women here would rather have you, if they had to make a choice, than the things that you're working so hard to provide. But there are 10% of the women who are like, no, that financial security is really important to me. So again, have that conversation.
It's funny, and this is a little sidebar. This was on the research that we did on why we get kind of sideways around money, men and women. And one of the things that we identified in that is that by trying to satisfy that insecurity of the relational stuff, a lot of women will say, we need to do things more together, which sometimes cost money, which helps their insecurity kind of feel a little better. But on the guy's side, because we're wired toward the finance stuff, it makes ours worse. It's like, now we're spending more money, I've got to work more. And that makes her feel, gosh, we're not relationally close. So all of these things, once we kind of learn what's going on with one another, then we can have a conversation and try to come to a good solution.
Now, we should mention, since we're talking about the money thing, just as a quick sidebar, we should mention that, we don't have the numbers here in the survey because we just don't have time to do a bunch of surveys, the polls with you guys. But there was some really interesting data that is worth looking at if you're interested. We don't have the book with us, but if you're interested in the whole having a great relationship around money, it's called Thriving in Love and Money. And one of the interesting things was to see what percentage of men and women, because there were some gender things, what percentage of men and women had that, for men having that burden to provide financially versus women, the burden to provide financially, et cetera. And it was interesting. For the only people who matched men's burden to provide mentally, like always there in the back of the mind, were single moms. Single moms, but even the single moms didn't get to the same level. It was just really interesting.
So one of the things that's helpful now for us as guys is, okay, Jeff, you've kind of explained what's going on maybe inside of her, and you've identified conflict, as maybe a cause for that, a trigger. Are there any others? And so that's what we'll do next. I'm going to identify a couple of triggers that, if you have experienced these in your relationship, you can kind of identify that might be the cause for some of the issues of her behavior that you would have otherwise said was random. So the first one, conflict. That makes sense. A second one is, it's quite frankly, it's Jeff's preferred method to handle any conflict, is withdrawal. I walk away. A third one is silence. As one woman said, when my husband is quiet, it must be because of me. It must be about me. And I just, for the women here, let me just say that sometimes guys are quiet because their favorite sports team has lost. And they don't feel like talking to anybody. And it's not you. But that's the grid that some women are, operate with by that, worry.
It's really
that
common.
It triggers it. Another is, life is hard and busy, and sometimes you're just worn down and your ability to resist certain worries and doubts are lower. So it could be that we call it her emotional bank account is depleted. So what do we do about it though? So maybe you've identified why she's feeling this way, but what do you do about it? And there's actually two ways that we can handle it, guys. One is kind of how to kind of repair it once you've noticed this insecurity being triggered. And then another one, which we'll get to, is a preventative measure. So what to do about it if you've noticed that it's been triggered, that this feeling of worry about the relationship is arisen within her. And this one we actually tested out on our survey. And it's if you will do or say something like this, guys, in the middle of, let's say it's a conflict, an argument. If you'll say something like, honey, I'm really angry right now and I gotta get some space to clear my head. But I want you to know we're okay.
Whew.
What's just happened?
So what you've just done, guys, is you've just told her, we're okay. This isn't the beginning of those 3 or 4 arguments of things spiraling down into, again, not that you're going to get divorced, but like just spiraling down into a difficult place. This isn't the beginning of that.
Did we have a Slido that we wanted to?
That we could tell you what we found on the national survey, but I am really curious to see what the women think here in this room. So here's the question, and there's 5 answer choices. Suppose you and your husband are in the middle of an emotional conflict, okay, and he needs to leave for a meeting. So exactly this thing that we were just talking about. If he were to add a reassurance, such as, we're okay, we're okay, we're gonna talk later, how much does it help to diminish any turmoil you're feeling? And you can see that one of the answers is, well, it doesn't apply because I wouldn't be feeling any turmoil. But then the others are, it doesn't help, it helps some, it helps quite a lot, or it resolves the turmoil itself. May not resolve the problem, obviously, but it resolves that, how I'm feeling about us and the conflict. And so it looks to me like we have basically 75, 73%.
Almost 95 if all the top.
Right, but in terms of people who says it helps a lot.
Yeah.
So, but it's going to be 90%-ish that say it helps in some meaningful way. Yeah.
So.
And actually, I can't read it. I'm really curious what that.
The bottom one is.
Yeah. Hold on. I gotta
How much?
What
2%.
is it? 2% say it doesn't apply to me.
So on the actual national survey, I think it was 4%.
I can't remember.
I think it was 96%.
Yeah.
Otherwise, that it helps. So let me give you guys a caveat on this. So that can give you some breathing space to process and think this through. But the caveat is, at some point, you've got to come back. One woman said, if I have to chase him down a day or so later, all the goodwill that he built up with me by reassuring me in the first place is kind of gone. So you got to come back. But here's the good thing. Here's also another positive thing. Several of the women in the focus group said, look, if my husband will re-engage on something that was unpleasant in the first place, if he will come back and re-engage in it, that matters far more to me than whatever it was we were at odds about in the first place.
Somebody's clapping over there. So
re-engage.
It's a thing.
So now I'm going to take the guy's side here. Here's what's going on inside of our guy mind for a lot of us. One is, remember how Shaunti was talking about how men tend to go underground internally? one of the reasons is, and I'm going to say this from our relationship, I don't know about yours, but Shaunti is wicked smart and fast on her feet, and I am not. It is almost like she's got in her computer brain, she's using the latest upgraded Intel processing chip out there. And I'm stuck with a chip from the 1980s. I'm serious. And it feels like I just can't keep up.
Okay.
So it's frustrating to me. I used to always think I was defective.
But can we just reassure the guys out here? Because it may feel like you're stuck with a chip from the 80s, but you're not. Like it is truly the way that many, not all, but many male brains are wired to process. Guys, the difference is that the female brain is processing at this is complicated, but is processing at a surface level all these different areas, and it goes down and down and down deeper across like all these different thoughts.
The two hemispheres of the brain.
Two hemispheres of the brain, and it's going deeper and deeper in sort of circles as she's processing. For your brain, it may feel like it's not that fast because you're not processing all of those things at once, because your brain is actually wired to process one thing deeply at a time, and then to go on to the next thing and the next thought deeply at a time. And so the fascinating thing is that both men and women actually have the same processing and the same IQ, et cetera, but they get there totally differently. So it may feel like you have a chip that's old, but you don't.
So tell me again what the neurologists say, that sometimes with neurologists, neuroscientists, what they say, how long in the scans, MRI scans, that how long can it take sometimes for a man's brain to process an emotional?
So if a guy is processing something emotional, right, it is going deep into that one thing.
I'm sorry, I'm a visual learner kind of guy. So as the way Shaunti has described kind of the women's brain, it's like they have millions of networked computers all talking together and working like that. And our guy brain is like 2 or 3 Cray supercomputers.
And it's just going down really deeply.
The one isn't talking to the other supercomputer until it finishes all its processing. Exactly. Then it moves over to that next one.
Exactly. And so the difference is, because of all of this massive network in the female brain, there's a lot of white matter, it's complicated, but there's a lot of processing speed at a shallow level, like I said, that gets deeper and deeper in stages. But that shallow blink processing, it can happen instantaneously. And then she starts processing and thinking, and she's, maybe that wasn't the right thing. And she's going like this. For a guy's brain, because if this is you, if you're going deeper and deeper into that one emotional, what on earth just happened, and you're thinking, what they found is that blink processing, that same kind of signal to go all the way down to the bottom, that can take 12 hours to pass in a man's brain. And then he goes on to the next one. But here's the thing. It's so much more complete by the time the signal is done, and the woman is going to get to that same space, but it's going to get there completely differently. And so this, by the way, just so you know, this is back to the men, but understanding men. But ladies, this is why you ask your husband at bedtime, what are you thinking about what I just said? He's like, I don't know. And then the next morning at breakfast, he can talk about it. That's the reason.
Well, I mean, when we would have our discussions, and she would ask me that question, and I'd go, I don't know.
And I'm like, how can you not know what you're thinking? But again.
I know I'm stirred up. I know I'm upset, but I don't have the words to describe what's going on inside of here. I can't do it.
Just don't think that there's something wrong or
exactly
weird.
Right.
Not at all. This is actually a strength of the male brain. Just like the women have a strength.
We're different, and God uses both of those strengths to create a amazing unit. Okay, so that was all the stuff that you could do once you've noticed that something's been triggered.
The we're okay.
That we're okay, the reassurance. There is actually a far better solution, and it's a preventative solution. Preventative is always the best solution. And you guys, we can do this. As a matter of fact, you already know it. It can be summed up by one single word, and the word is pursuit. And the guys are going, okay, it's summed up by that, but I have no idea what you mean by that. Well, you actually do know, and you actually are an expert at it. You just have forgotten. You don't realize that you're an expert at it. Its pursuit means it's what you did to make her fall in love with you in the first place.
It's what you did when you were dating.
Exactly. And now every guy has an alarmed look on his face and goes, my gosh, that was exhausting. Are you kidding me? I got a job. We've got a mortgage. We got kids. How in the world can you expect me to do what I did when I was dating to now?
So, and here's the difference. Here's the thing. Guys, when you're thinking about what prevents this stuff, and I think we should probably say, when we say prevents it, what we're preventing the concern, what we mean is building a sense of solid certainty.
That's right. So what we mean by preventative stuff, it means that even though some of those discussions occur or that silence occurs,
the triggers,
it doesn't cause that worry or that anxiety to approach the front part of her brain because she is settled in your love for her. And she, this is an ongoing thing. You can't it's not permanently loved. But because you are reassuring her in ways that she needs, even when those events occur, they won't result in the worry.
So when we're talking about pursuit and the things that you did when we were dating, that the guys are thinking, that's exhausting, right? No, here's the thing. You're thinking, guys, you're equating it to like the actions that you took, like you arranged the candlelight dinner or the picnic in the park or whatever. Like all that stuff is good, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the message that you were sending her every day. The message that I love you today. I would choose you all over again today. I'm glad I'm with you today. Like you sent her that message every day. And guys, you can send her that message with the simplest things. Like literally, you're walking through a parking lot and you reach across and you take her hand. That says, I would choose you all over again. Or you're sitting at church or like an event like this, or you're out to dinner with another couple and you put your arm around her in church. Like that's a good job, buddy. I saw that. That was awesome. And now every other man in the room is like, dang. But literally, it is these little things, or you're like texting her, and during the day, like, oh my gosh, this has been such a rough day. The boss has just been so hard, and I cannot wait to see you later. I love you so much. Press send. Like she will screenshot that text message, right? Because it's a little thing, but it says this pursuit. It says, I would choose you all over again. Now, we should probably say, just as a quick caveat, so ladies, when he puts his arm around you in church next time, don't go, you are only doing that because she told you to. Right? Like it's easy to think that. Or guys, if she starts looking for things to say thank you for, don't roll your eyes and go, she's only doing that because that's what that marriage conference said. No, remember this morning? Believe the best. This is how we feel about each other. It's just we didn't know that really texting her like that, putting my arm around her, it matters.
Do we have a Slido that we wanted to?
Actually, you know what? This is the Slido for the women. We did the little things for the men just to see out of curiosity. And these are the ones that tended to come up the most on the surveys. So these are the ones that we have here. But I'm curious in terms of what makes you feel cared for by your husband, which of these are a little thing that has a big impact on you? And So, what is it that, he pulls himself out of a funk when he's in a bad mood? He reaches out and takes my hand when we're walking through a parking lot. He leaves me a quick voicemail. He puts his arm around me and we're sitting together at church. He tells me sincerely, "You're beautiful." What are those things that matter the most? And we can see, again, the top 4. And so the top one, telling me sincerely, "You're beautiful." Ha!
Okay.
Jeff and I have
We'll
an
get to
ongoing
that.
debate on that. Leaving me a quick voicemail or text message, say he's thinking about me. Taking my hand. Pulling himself out of a funk. By the way, that whole pulling himself out of a funk thing, guys, when that matters, one of the things that we found is that it really matters. Because not to be offensive, but there are some guys that kind of let themselves maybe get into a funk and are in a bad mood a lot and don't realize that it actually makes her feel insecure. So making an effort to pull himself out is a big deal. Okay, so again, you're just ask her what matters to her.
So here's one of the issues that we as guys have in these little things is we spend so much time in our own brains. We don't
Can I
realize.
interrupt? I'm so sorry. This is an example of this particular group, because we used the top ones from women. Do you remember that question of when you're at odds, what would make you feel better? And it was that he appreciates what I do, and that this was a higher than average number of women. It was 45%. So if I would have put that he says thank you for what I do on here, I bet this group of women would have had a higher number of that. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
One of the issues is that we live in our guy brain and we don't realize what matters, what sends these signals to our wives and to our girlfriends. So for example, when we were working on the research on this for the book, and it was lunchtime one day, and I went, you know what, I'm kind of hungry. You want to head out and go to that little sandwich shop down the road? And so Shaunti said, sure. So we get in the car, we're talking, and we pull into this kind of little mall type area, pedestrian mall area. And we get out of the car and we're walking through the parking lot, and there's, rows and rows of cars. And Shaunti's in kind of the middle of the row walk, and I'm next to the cars. And as I noticed that there was a car coming down our row. And so I walked over to her and I put my hand in the small of her back and pulled her close to me, and we walked into the little cafe, get our sandwiches. The next day, we were in a focus group of about 10 women and me and another guy. Because, we were trying to figure out what is it that is surprising to us guys.
About these little
things. And so Shaunti was up at the whiteboard and she's leading the discussion. And she goes, well, just yesterday, Jeff and I went out for lunch. And as we were walking through a parking lot, he walked over to me and put his hand in the small of my back and pulled me close to him. And we walked into the cafe. And all of the women in the focus group went, yeah, it still blows my mind every time that this happens. Because guys, I didn't get your wives in here and cue them to do that and say that. And that's exactly what happened in the focus group. And me and this other guy looked at each other like, are you kidding me? I can't believe it. Because now, let me put you into my brain the day before. We get out of the car, Shaunti's talking, and she doesn't see that car. And no, she's continuing to talk. It's gonna hit her. And I hesitated to go over and pull her close to me. It wasn't because I wanted her to get hit by the car, but because if our positions had been reversed and she was next to the cars and I was out in the middle and I was doing the talking, if she'd have come over and done that to me, I'd have gone, I saw the car. I wasn't gonna let it hit me. She had none of that. In my mind, I was translating in the moment what I would be feeling. She's not me. She's wired by a God who has wired her very differently from me. So, guys, we just need to get out of our brains in some of these things. One other thing, and I want to get this before we hit the last little topic. It's one of my favorite stories. So on the whiteboard, and what we found here, that it feels great to know that he finds his wife beautiful.
Yeah, that was the top answer.
It was the top answer. And so that is an amazing thing. And I tell you, ladies, we think that. Sometimes, like thank you, it doesn't come out of our mouth. And sometimes when we actually find ourselves trying to say it or do it, it almost feels artificial or kind of, we feel it, but it feels kind of awkward in saying it sometimes, at least starting to say that, make a practice out of it. And so when the book first came out, we were doing lots of interviews. And one was we were going to do this television interview. And the producer had us asking, before we went on camera, he was asking us a bunch of questions. And one of the questions was dealing with this, that, it's important for a woman to know that her husband finds her beautiful, and that he says that to her. And he goes, oh, that reminds me of a story with me and my wife. And this is like one of my favorite stories of all time. He said, when, we were young marrieds, probably first 5 years, we had 3 little kids. I was a producer of a local television station, news station, didn't pay very well. Life was busy. We were exhausted all the time, but we were committed that we would do a date night at least once every 2 weeks. We'd get one set of our parents to watch the kids so we didn't have to pay for anything. And we would go to this same little hole-in-the-wall pizza place, just our place and our night together. And so he said it was the kind of place that, when you'd walk in, they had a chalkboard and they would write trivia questions on the chalkboard. And if you got the trivia question right, you got a free soda with your pizza. Now, this was obviously pre-Google. And so he said, we walk in one night and the trivia question is a sports question. And he said, I gotta confess, I know nothing about sports. But I knew this answer. I just couldn't think of it in the moment. So what was the question? The question was, famous Notre Dame football coach who coached the Gipper. And he said, so I'm sitting there, we order our pizza, and I'm sitting there, and my wife's talking, and I'm working it. I am trying to pull that answer, that name, from the deepest recesses of my memory. And, pizza comes, she's still talking, and I'm still working it. And finally, 15 minutes or 20 minutes into their meal, their time there, he said, got it. And before I knew what was happening, I just blurted it out. And I went, Newt Rockne. And she looked at me and she kind of grinned. And we continued talking. And I noticed that she started to flush a little. And she was getting kind of giggly when we would talk. And I'm sitting there and I went to her, what's going on with us right now? And she looked at me and she said, you've never said that to me before. And I went, right. What exactly have I never said to you before? And she said, you rock me. And I went, yes. And when I came clean with her 6 months later, we had a great laugh about it. And now whenever I want to tell her how beautiful she is to me, I simply say, Newt Rockne. So guys, believe this. If you will practice these little things of sending that message that you're choosing her all over again, the date night, the taking her hand, but as you walk through the parking lot, you will get credit for even boneheaded things that you do. And it works. We can do this. So let's jump. We got 5 minutes left, and I'd love to jump to
I'd love you to cover that one topic.
The very one, because this is one that is, it's a very small one. It feels like it's kind of insignificant at some level, but it's very significant, and women have told us this. So it's the difference between the male brain and the female brain, the way that we process thoughts and emotions. So we've kind of touched a little bit on this with some of the stuff, but word pictures, because I learned I'm a visual learner. So if we kind of think of the male brain as like a computer desktop, what is happening when we are processing thoughts and emotions or worries? What happens is it's like we have one window open on the desktop at one time. And we are working on it, solve it, finish it, whatever you want to call it. And then we click the X and make it go away, and we open up the next window. And we work on that, and that's how we kind of proceed, very sequentially. It feels very orderly, at least to us. Our wives or women,
Most women, not all.
most women, their computer desktop brain has 10 windows open at the same time. And they are bouncing between all 10 of them simultaneously. Don't ask me how they do it, but they tell me that's what they're doing.
All these different thoughts and worries
and they're all
feelings
happening at the same time. And then, and this is where I get into trouble, but I'm going to say it anyway, it's almost like their desktop's been infected with a virus. Because another window pops open that they don't want there. And they click the X to make it go away, and it goes away, and it pops back up. And they click the X, and it pops back up. And so that is a troubling, disconcerting feeling that they have. And so think of it like this way. I'll put it in kind of now real world terms. Think of it as, and you've maybe seen this. Shaunti may come to me, it's a Friday afternoon, and she says, you know, at work today, I felt that Joanne really had it out for me. I mean, we're friends, but it felt like she embarrassed me in front of the team. I don't understand it. And I went, oh, okay, well, you know, I'm trying to be sensitive and listened because that's important. And come to find out, Joanne has now gone on vacation. So Shaunti can't get in touch with her, won't see her face to face for a couple of weeks. And, you know, and I listened. And then about 15 minutes later, she says, you know, I really feel like Joanne tried to embarrass me. And she says it a few more times. And I'm thinking, you know, this keeps coming back up. So I offer her some of this great advice. Because, you know, she can't solve it now. She's going to have to wait 2 weeks. And it's like, sweetheart, there's nothing you can do about it. Just don't think about it. It is so great being a guy because we can give great advice like that. And when those kind of thoughts hit our brain, for the most part, we click the X and make it go away. For women, that is about as impossible.
It feels impossible to a lot of us. And so just for you guys to know, you're saying click the X. Now you know that it's actually hard to do that. And instead, it's like this crazy, simple, caring thing to just say something like, is there something that would make you feel better? Is there something that would help you, you know, process this rather than kind of making her feel stupid for needing to process it? Like, yeah, it would make me feel better if I sent her an email, even though she's on vacation. Awesome. You know, like, and this isn't trying to fix it, which can drive us a little nuts when we just need to process through the feelings or whatever, but literally like,
it's encouraging action.
What would make you feel better at this point, and encouraging.
So again, guys, and this will be the last, one of the things that's hard for us in this is because we feel like we don't have a grid for it. You do. Let me explain what this feels like, what they're experiencing, and what they experience. It happens routinely. It happens often in a lot of ways, especially with respect to relationship issues. So, guys, let's say, put yourself in this scenario. It's Friday afternoon. It's 5 o'clock. Your company that you work for has just lost that week its biggest account, usually like 50% of your revenues. And you were one of the project leads on that client. And your boss comes by your cube at that time at 5, and he says, hey, Jeff, I'm gonna need to talk to you in my office first thing Monday morning. Have a great weekend. How's your weekend? Well, what if you tell your wife about this and she says, look, there's nothing you can do till Monday. Just don't think about it. That's what it feels like. And
for us.
Exactly. Now let's think of that scenario a little differently.
So now, guys, imagine that boss who walked away, he comes back 5 minutes later and he goes, Jeff, I think I gave you the wrong impression. The reason that I want to talk to you in my office on Monday morning is that, yeah, this has been a really bad week, but we have been cultivating another client, and I'm going to want you to actually be one of the people on that project. And so that's the reason I wanted to talk to you. How grateful are you to your boss? Because what has just happened? You've been reassured in the area of your question and your insecurity and your worry. That gratitude that you feel for your boss is the exact same gratitude your wife feels for you. When you will say, for example, look, this is challenging right now, we're okay. Or I love you so much. That is the gratitude that you feel, that she feels. And I know that we're out of time. Can I show them the blog in case they're interested in signing up? Just as we go, one of the things that we love to do is we equip people with practical tools every week. We put out a blog. We spend a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of research on creating what is it that we want to help you with in a marriage or dating or workplace or your kids or mental health or whatever, some of the latest research. And so if you're interested in getting that blog, it's totally free. Just sign up for the blog and you'll start getting our missives once a week.
I want to thank all of you for spending so much time and being a great group. I mean, very affirming. You know, it's always tough when we're up here speaking to an audience and there is no reaction at all. So thank you for that.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. Thank you all. And I think Pastor Tiago, there we go. Wait, let's hold on.
Awesome. What an encouraging afternoon, amen? Can we just praise the Lord one more time for this couple that came over? Awesome. So I want to echo what Shaunti and Jeff said. I just want to thank you for spending so much time on our campus this morning and this afternoon and just being such an engaging congregation and showing them, you know, that we really value them and that we appreciate them. So thank you for being here. Shaunti and Jeff are going to be at the book station and to greet you and to sign some books if you'd like. So what I would encourage you to go check out their book stand. Like I told you this morning, that's kind of the way that they fund their staff and fund what they do across the country. So if you're feeling led by the Lord to support their ministry, I'm sure they would really appreciate it. So thank you for being here. Thank you for an awesome first marriage weekend. We're excited for what all the Lord has in store for the future. But let's stand for closing prayer. Father, we're just so thankful for everything you did this weekend. We know, God, that you love marriage, you instituted marriage, and you have a great plan for marriages. So we're excited, Lord, that we have people in your church that go across the country and the world to spread some good news about this institution. So we pray a blessing over this couple as they continue the ministry that you've put on their lives. And we just thank you, Lord, that we got the opportunity to be here. So I pray, God, that as we go home today and as we start our weeks, that you encourage us, that you equip us, and that we can just continue to have a great day. And we're so thankful for you. So we love you and we praise you and we thank you for everything you did this weekend. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.